When writing the introduction section, there are some things to think about. For example, the page length. Professional journals have strict page limits for reports. So this limits how long it can be. You might want to ask your instructor how long is expected or allowed for your introduction to be. It might be 2 pages. And you might also at that point ask about the methods section, results, and discussion section. What is appropriate for your course or the venue that you're going to be presenting your work in? In an empirical research report, researchers usually do the following. The first thing is to introduce the report. Provide a little information that will entice the reader to read on. You might start with a prevalence rate to introduce a problem. I tend to like to do that. But make sure it leads into and not away from your ideas. If you're studying smoking, you might have a smoking prevalence rate for people who are in the age group of your sample. If you're studying college students, what's the smoking rate in the US for people who are 18 to 24, which a lot of college students are? You wouldn't want to put the worldwide prevalence rate of smoking. If you're studying commuting stress, what is the US rate of commuting, and maybe choose a prevalence rate a little more specific to what you're getting into. Would it be car drivers if you're studying that? You can think about that. An introduction also has a literature review. And it's going to be rather minimal if you're a student working on your first paper, but there's probably going to be a number of minimum, a minimum number of required articles. What is a literature review? Well, it's an account of what has been published by accredited scholars and researchers. It can be an entire report published on its own, so you can actually publish a lit review. It's also part of an introduction section of, say, an empirical experiment. The purpose of it is to tell the reader what knowledge and ideas have been established already and probably published already about a particular topic, and to reveal the strengths and weaknesses of that existing research. It's organized and it directly relates to your research question. It should lead into your research question and help the reader get to what you're going. It should help explain your ideas and how you got to your ideas. It'll eventually kind of explain how you got to your hypothesis. You'll identify areas when you're writing a lit review of controversy, and you'll be describing limitations of previous research. When you're writing one, you can condense the findings from several studies into one sentence. So that's pretty typical. I'm sure if you've looked in your course textbooks for your courses in social sciences, you'll find that there's several sentences throughout the book where there might be some finding and several studies are listed. A lit review does more than just usually summarize an entire study. It usually has a few sentences about multiple studies. Here's an example of how you can write a few sentences with multiple citations. Let's say you want to say that stress has been measured in several ways. Various measures of stress have been associated with an increased risk of smoking, such as high perceived stress, that's one way of measuring stress, the number of stressful events, that's another way of measuring it, and it goes on from there. You'll see where the citations are listed right here. This technique is highly recommended, and it demonstrates that you understand the literature, and it makes it easier for people to read if you can do that. When you're more advanced as someone writing a lit review, you'll really want to hone in and help the reader understand what is known and what is not known, and not just simply summarize. That's really not the goal of a literature, just to summarize what's already been done, unless you help the reader understand what's missing and what they can look for in the literature. You might want to use phrases like this. Little is known about whether X and Y, variable X and Y, some variable, are associated. Or a great deal is known about what those two variables are known about, or what's known about them, what's not known about them. You might also say previous studies have shown mixed or inconclusive results regarding something. Maybe Jones 1994 says one thing, but Smith 2004 says something else. A third thing you might want to do is to discuss, and you usually will do in our intro section, discuss how your research fills a gap or improves upon what's already been done. So let's say so far you said something about whether your studies are, the studies that you found showed conclusive results or inconclusive results. Well, you might add a sentence like this: our study will determine whether X and Y are associated in a college sample, if you were able to show that it hasn't been done in a college sample before. You could do something even more exciting than that, but that's just to give you a sense of what to do. After you've done those things of introducing the idea, showing what we already know, showing some problems and gaps in what's already known, then you're going to get into your idea of why you're going to do the study. Why, when we know what we already know, should you be doing what you're going to do? So you're going to sell the importance of the study. Imagine someone would give you $20,000 if you can sell the importance of your study, but you have to do it in a scholarly way without a lot of words. You can put a little bit of that in here. And after that, you'll state the purpose, research question, or hypothesis. In my class, you'll probably just be stating one or more hypotheses. After you've stated the hypothesis at the end, you can add one sentence like this: we expect this because. Otherwise, you really shouldn't have because in your hypothesis. The hypothesis needs to be a statement that can easily be tested with statistics. So you want to state it that way. Remember, a hypothesis is a prediction statement or an if-then statement that helps explain something. And it's a prediction. If you don't know how to do any mediational or moderation analysis, it should be a rather simple, straightforward hypothesis that doesn't have the word because in it. It might be, as depression increases, alcohol use increases. Or people who drink more alcohol will be found to have more depression, and go on from there. It might be helpful to think of the introduction as something like an hourglass in its shape. It's like the top half of an hourglass, where a full report is like a full hourglass. And we start at a very broad level, discussing a problem broadly. We start to get a more specific, summarizing literature in general, and then end up with the hypothesis. Keep in mind, you want to still be logical within the introduction section. If this doesn't make sense to you, just do what makes logical sense to you and write an introduction that clearly identifies your ideas, how your ideas connect to other people's ideas, and how your ideas fill the gaps in what's already being known. It's really difficult to do that and fill up the gaps that are already known. You'll find that can be challenging. The method section and results sections are like the most narrow part of the hourglass because the author focuses narrowly and specifically on his or her study. And then the discussion section gets broad again, concluding with implications and applications for research and society at large. Many research paper authors review the work of other authors to gain examples of how to write introduction sections, so you might want to do that. Kind of keep reminding you of that when I talk. The introduction, by the way, can have clearly labeled sections if you'd like. The methods section will definitely have that, but it's optional in the introduction section. As a last reminder, you can treat this as a technical writing report, almost a little more like a chemistry lab than you're used to, not really an English paper, an English writing class paper. And make sure you know how many hypotheses you're supposed to have in your course paper. If you're in my class, don't forget to look at examples like Dr. Unger's report, Dr. Trinidad's report, or people like Dr. Evans and Dr. Wiener's reports to help you.